I'm here with Billy Hanson, writer and director of Bone Cold. Just for anyone listening, this is one of those movies that and I've not seen the trailer for it. I went into the movie Bone Cold, so to speak. I'm a reviewer, so I'm allowed to do puns. But but this is a movie based on the trailer, I would expect it to be one thing. I would expect it to be action. It certainly has that, but this is not quite the movie I expected, and I was pleasantly surprised where it went. It has a low budget quality, kind of similar to Coherence, where like I wouldn't describe Coherence as simply a time travel movie. I wouldn't describe Primer as simply a time travel movie. Likewise, I wouldn't consider Bone Cold simply an action movie. I guess what was the development process like on this? Kind of where was your mindset when making this?
So this one, it started from a really simple idea. It started from a really like basically one image that popped into my head, and it was this one man on his own holding a rifle, running through the snowy woods, and there's a creepy monster in the distance. Um, and that was pretty much it. From there, I kind of started unpacking it and asking myself, who this guy was and what he's running from and what the creature is and what it wants. And the story grew sort of very organically out of that. And I think that's one of the big reasons why it's not necessarily just an action film or just horror. It's not one thing. It kind of walks between several lines because it really, excuse me, it really was centered on this one tone, this one emotion, this one, or not one emotion, but one character and his situation more than anything else. So couple that with the fact that we moved so incredibly quickly through the development process, there wasn't really time for any of us to stop and say, like, and take a step back and say, what kind of a movie is this? It was very much just like, no, this is the story we're telling. We're not worrying about anything else. Because the idea came to me, it was November 2018, and we were shooting by February 2019. So it was like, I keep describing it as assembling train tracks in front of the moving train because, I was writing as we were casting, as we were doing pre-production. So I really just had to grab hold of this one character, this one creature, and tell that story the way I knew how, we could shoot it too. But yeah, the one thing I keep hearing about it as people see it more and more is that people are surprised by it. They didn't expect it to go where it went. And I really like that, actually. I really like that takeaway because I like to surprise an audience.
Yeah. And also I was thinking like with indie movies like this, I don't know what the budget was, but I would suspect, and this is complete ignorance on my part, outside looking in, but I think I can imagine this reading the script on this is just an absolute page turner because the movie actually is. You develop the mystery well and the suspense well. But like say you get Bone Cold as you're going into production. Let's say it's indie, it's rough around the edges, but let's say you have a budget of like 50 million or whatever. But then you have to start making studio cuts to it, and it becomes an air quote better movie, a more polished movie, air quotes.
Yeah.
But then you have to start making cuts to the story. Oh, we need more of this, more of that. Kind of describe your thoughts on that, like a big budget movie where you have to make those creative choices that you may not want to make versus making a movie like this where you have the constraints of a budget but you get to still tell the movie that you want to make.
Yeah, I think it's almost the same sort of thing that you're doing, like I go into every script and every movie with a lot more than I know is going to end up in the final product because I know like with your script is going to, it's the age old thing. Like you write one movie, you shoot another movie and you edit a different movie, right? Like your third movie. And that totally holds true, I think, for everything. So I try to approach anything that I'm doing, budget or no, with the idea like, all right, here's our bigger world, and we're going to be trimming it down for whatever reason. Like we had a lot of budget constraints on Bone Cold. The budget was very low, and so we were sort of forced to cut some stuff. We just didn't have time to shoot it, or we shot half of it. We couldn't do it because of the pandemic. There were definitely things that we shot like half of scenes that we intended to come back and do pickups for. We just never were able to, so that goes away. And then the story kind of becomes what it becomes. But at the center of all of that, it's just really trying to hold on to that central theme and that the character arc and what they're going through, trying to maintain and protect that through that process. So, there were corners that we were backed into, but, at the end of the day, the finished version of Bone Cold is a lot different from the script that I wrote, but it still has the same feel to it. It still has the same meaning behind it. And the characters are going through what I want them to go through. And I imagine on a big budget movie, I like to imagine it's the same kind of thing. You shoot a little bit more than you need. So you, as a storyteller and filmmaker, you have an idea of the bigger world. And then you kind of look at it like, how do we tell this more efficiently, more quickly, with more energy? And I can give you an example too. So the character of Sveta, played by Elise Bergreen, she is like a really impactful character in this movie. And she's got one line of dialogue, and it's very cool. And she's like an action figure almost. In my script and in my first cuts of the movie, she had a whole big dialogue scene in Russian with her two like henchmen basically. And our editor came in and said, hey man, you don't need this scene. Like, watch this. And he's just sort of cut it. And so it ends on her look. And that was so much more powerful and impactful than a whole big dialogue scene that was doing the same thing. So yeah, I'm always going into a project knowing I'm going to lose some of the stuff, but trying to get as much as we can.
Yeah, that I actually really loved her character. I totally agree with that decision, because like she's kind of like the silent, mysterious, who is this person? What are they going to do? And all you really get to know of her is like she's got him in the crosshairs, and then just cuts to her face. She's got that little smirk. I'm like, who is this person? It totally works.
Cool. And her scene was really good. It had nothing to do with her performance. Like, and I know she worked so hard on learning those lines in Russian. She got it. And like, I felt bad cutting it, but you know what? He was absolutely right. It's more impactful if it's just on her face and then you cut away.
Yeah, I've heard like I don't know if this is apocryphal or not, but I've heard Terrence Malick would like shoot a scene with the dialogue and then shoot that exact same scene without the dialogue. Of course, he's got the time and bandwidth to be able to pull something like that off. Yeah. But I do like the idea of you write the script and you have it in your head like, oh, this totally works, and you say it out loud, yeah, it works. But then maybe on the day you shoot it, and it's like, and I don't know. I think this look they give is a lot more powerful than what comes out of their mouth.
Yeah. Well, there was a scene too. One of the toughest scenes that we had to shoot. It was a dialogue scene that's in the middle of the movie, and it's right after a big action moment. And it's the two characters really being like ripped apart. They're moving in different directions. It's this big blow up argument between the two of them. And, ultimately on paper, it's a simple dialogue scene. But when we were filming it, I was watching it and it just was not working. It wasn't working. And I'm watching like these two really good actors. Like, why can't they get it? And then I realized like, it's not them at all. They're both giving great performances, but it's disjointed and weird because the script isn't right. And a lot of that is because I had to write it so fast, but it wasn't until it was these two actors like really like trying to find it in the moment. I leaned over to our producer, Jacqueline Amore, and I was like, this scene kind of sucks. I need to rewrite this. So we broke for lunch early. I went like hid myself away and just like hammered through the scene, rewrote it. And I realized I had put too much in it. They were talking about too many different things at the same time. So I pulled most of the lines out, and it was a much simpler scene. But then the way it plays out now, it's like, okay, now it hits. Now they got it. And then when we got back to set, they crushed it immediately. We got a bunch of good takes, and it's a good scene. So yeah, it was, I think, moving really fast. You have to be, you just got to be flexible. You've got to be able to roll with whatever those punches are,
Do you think a lot of that comes from the pendulum swinging the other way? Like, for instance, when you write something, the character's backstory, this and that about the characters. And maybe afraid that if I don't put it on the page, they're not going to get it. But then at the same time, almost like when you write it, you don't want to be too on the nose, but at the same time, you want the information to get across. So maybe when you're writing it, you probably write too much, whereas maybe getting someone else's eyes on it, be like, hey, yeah, you don't need that. We get it.
Yeah, I do. I run into that a lot. I tend to go more on the like, I discover a lot while I'm in the process of writing. So you can, if you read my rough drafts, which no one ever will, but if you
Well,
ever
you
read
can
them,
send it to me. I'll read the hell out of it.
yeah, you can kind of see me figure things out maybe halfway through a scene, and then I'll put other beats in. So I do a lot of rewriting to really condense that stuff. But I also tend to write a little bit on the nose first, just to make sure that I can sort of anchor myself and I know what I'm saying in any given moment. And I can always pull back from that if it's a little on the nose. But yeah, I feel like I read so much writing and I see a lot of movies where people are talking around the point and it just can drone on for a long time when really it's like, no, say this, and that's your scene. It can be quick and efficient like that. That's the most impactful. So I definitely try and start from just be really clear and smooth it out afterward. Yeah, if it's too much, if it's too on the nose, you can always pull back.
And what's it like being on set? Like, you get everyone on set, the crew, and then all of a sudden now the actors are in their costumes, they're there, they're reading the words that you wrote that you had in your head this whole time. And that's just got to be exciting to hear. And maybe even sometimes like they'll say a line or they'll you know perform it in such a way that you didn't have in your head at the time, but it works
Yeah.
better. But also conversely, maybe they're like, oh, you didn't quite get that right. Can we do it? Like kind of the positive and negatives of hearing people read your dialogue for the first time.
Yeah, I'm always excited about it. Like I knew that I had something special with Bone Cold because I was excited to shoot every scene. Like every time we were moving on to something else, it's like, oh, now we get to do this scene. Awesome. And I was really excited to see what actors would bring to it. And I try to be very protective of the story and the tone and the style, but I also try not to be too precious about the words. So the specifics. Um, there are sometimes I will kind of insist on certain words. It's just for pacing or something like that. Um, but I really love collaborating with actors, seeing what they bring because that's why you bring someone on. You want them to bring their thing to it. And you find a lot of extra stuff like that. Like working with John Stoddard, he's a good friend of mine, and I know he's a terrific actor. He knows his shit. Like he shows up to set and he knows what to do. He knows where to go. He has his performance in mind. And then on the flip side, Matt Monroe he is just a ball of energy that never stops, and he just goes and goes and just it's like a live wire basically. Um, there weren't too many times on this movie where I felt like we had to course correct. I think everyone started really understanding their characters well, understanding what they were going through and where they were headed. Um, maybe only once or twice me and an actor had to step aside and say like, hey, let's get on the same page with this. We're not quite in sync here. And I'd have to sort of explain a little bit where the characters were at, especially in the latter half of the movie where things get it's very, very psychological. We were sort of threading some needles with that. So John and I had a few more conversations, but again, it never really felt like course correcting. It felt more like, hey, let's get on the same page. There's a little disconnect, but that's routine. But for this movie, I was always really excited to get to the next thing and do the next thing.
Well, I kind of actually want to wrap this up because I'm really excited to get into some spoilers with you. This comes out on digital Blu-ray and select theaters June 13th. I believe that's a Tuesday.
Yeah, it'll be Tuesday.
Well, I actually let's ask that. Have you got to see this in a theater yet with a crowd?
Yeah, so we just had our LA premiere earlier this week, and it was electric. It was awesome. It was real. The crowd was really engaged. It was a packed house. People were gasping and shrieking and cheering, and it was it was honestly, it was a relief. We had seen it before with a few smaller crowds. We had our premiere at in New York City, Dances with Films, and it was that was a great crowd as well. But it wasn't a packed theater, so good response. But when we watched it in LA, it was like, all right, yeah, we got something cool here. Like this is an engaging movie, and people are really being affected by it. So that was a
Awesome.
blast.
Awesome. And also, I in all these with my co-host has a "What's in the Box" segment. We have people put movies in the box that are underseen, or maybe you really like and not enough people talk about. What's a movie that you would like to put in the box that you think more people should see and more people should talk about that they don't?
You know what? I have the perfect one. I always talk about the movie Bug, the William
Oh,
Friedkin
William Free.
movie.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
I love that movie, and I always try to get people to watch it, but people will not watch it. But it's so good. It's so interesting and like just a fascinating performance by Michael Shannon and Ashley Judd. And yeah, I'm always rattled every time I see that movie.
Yeah, that's a great pick. Well, thank you for joining me. We're gonna take a quick break and then go into some spoilers, but I would definitely check out Bone Cold on June 13th, or after June 13th if you're listening to
Anytime.
this late. Just watch the thing. And again, I would say the best way to go into this movie is just go in cold, and the less you know about it going in, I think the more surprised you're going to be about what this is. But you made a fantastic movie, and congratulations.
Thank you so much, man. Appreciate it.